Okay, delight to have a chance to connect with you again, Robert. Thank you.
Likewise, Andrew. Looking forward to it. Since our last chat, my brain's been like, so I'm
Yeah,
excited at
your
the
aura is
threads that
still
we're
going.
starting.
Me too. I had a chance to look at the some of the research that you'd compiled. It was a little bit wild and really showing some of the power of vibe coding and the acceleration that you can get, or I don't know if it's vibe coding, but the AI augmented research and thinking and obviously still will take us validating and sifting through the ideas, but it's just amazing the pace and the speed. Shall we start with our 10-minute meditation slash daydreaming exercise?
Yeah, let's do 8 minutes.
8 minutes. Okay. I'll set a timer.
All right.
See you on the other side. All right. So that's been about 8 minutes.
Anything come up for you?
Fantastic. So, yeah, I had just freshly reviewed some of the notes you've done, the first principles research on how terrible meetings are in general in terms of how much energy is wasted and time is wasted for people and how they're typically not well orchestrated, not well managed. And it really feels like meeting hygiene and structure is a significant factor. I don't know, I'm just going to make throwing up random numbers, like 40% of the factor in the the people's experience of a company either being effective or ineffective. Like if the meetings are really good and well managed, it's a big part of people feeling like their time is respected, their time at work is
Mm.
respected, they're making progress, they're having fun. And so it feels like it's upstream of a lot of work satisfaction and effectiveness stuff. And also it is by definition, it is a shared space. So it's a space of shared consciousness. That is what it is. So if you work in a virtual company and meet together with your colleagues once a day or twice a day, something like that, that is some of the primary shared real-time consciousness that people have. If you're in the same physical space, you're abiding in that with that shared consciousness all the time. If you're in the same, if you're a virtual company, the overlap between people's awareness of what's going on in the company is limited, but that's the space in which that overlap happens, or a whole lot of that overlap happens. Does that make sense?
And how do you find this is just the second time we've done this, but how do you find starting, considering we're exploring like meeting efficiency and that we're starting our meetings with 8 minutes of largely silent introspective time, how do you find that lands us or how that lands you in a position to meet in perhaps a better or a worse way for our time
So
together now?
feel I feel relaxed, and I feel like there's not
Mm.
the immediacy of time pressure. This is a funny paradox. We're trying to look at how do we save time for people, and
Yeah.
but by giving just a lot of open space in the beginning, it kind of arrests or suspends that time anxiety that I think can be
Mm.
quite counterproductive. I think there's a time anxiety. I certainly have and have had plenty of that that can be quite counterproductive. That's very conducive to busy work as opposed to effectiveness. I think in my relaxed state
Mm.
and
Mm.
feeling not as rushed, I feel more, I'm optimistic that I will be more comfortable sharing my ideas with you openly and without fear. Obviously, also, there's no power dynamic between us particularly, but that helps. But yeah, and what about yourself? Or further questions from me?
It's funny when I first dropped in, the first thought that came up was that AIs can't do this right now. They can't sit in a meeting and just be quiet because they're so busy responding to each other. And that's when they end up in these kind of useless spirals. They're just so quick at responding. And it struck me that's actually pretty insightful on what makes a lot of meetings very inefficient is that everyone just is so quick to respond to each other rather than actually just taking a minute to listen. And it reminds me a little bit about one of the Quakers' practices, which is before you answer a question, you take a breath. And just taking that breath before you respond, it moves you from reacting to actually responding more effectively. At least that's what's thought to be the practice. And with this particular extended version of that, yeah, there's like a dropping of the guard in a sense and a humbling as you come into the space and just a quiet. It's also a really good practice anyway, right? So if you have trouble meditating for 20 minutes or half an hour or an hour each day, these little 8-minute slots at the start of each meeting actually can end up being they can add up over the course of a day. I think there's something to this that feels quite potent in a way, although it feels a bit counterproductive in a sense, but there's something there. So I'm excited to explore this more with you over the rest of our time together. And I'm wondering if there's maybe a way in which we could, I'm not sure, measure the impact of it, but I guess it's just more qualitative at this point than anything. Or we need to try a few where we don't do that and then explore the difference.
A couple of things come to mind. I really do think that distributing bits of peace through your day is really quite lovely as an anchor, right? And de-escalating things in your mind regularly through the day. Whereas if you just do one meditation a day, it gets pretty distant 4 hours or 6 hours into your day. I do have a good friend who attempted to build a company around the idea of 2 minutes to arrive at the beginning of every meeting. So he actually tried to build an app. It's interesting that, and I've got another story about somebody I know in the same space that I just realized. He ended up seemingly not being successful, although he fairly quickly pivoted from like software that would just facilitate a 2-minute meditation to arrive at the beginning of a meeting into some other adjacent product area, and then eventually, I think, gave that up. He would obviously have a lot of thoughts on this topic and a lot of understanding that we could tap if we wanted to, or I could readily call between. Why don't I add that?
Well, I definitely think it's worth, a handful of questions. Have a bit of a chat with him, see how he went. I'd be really curious how he landed on 2 minutes. And then I wonder if we play around with the time format that we've got so far. But I don't know, but 8 minutes feels quite good right now. I feel like 2 minutes might be a little too short to really get there. Particularly on I get it on the mindfulness piece, but at least for the daydreaming piece and allowing things to wander in, that slight extension, I think goes a long way. So
this guy, his name's Hemant Banu. He worked for a group called Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute. And one of the practices that they had, and that's the one that came out of Google, the corporate mind, they had a minute to arrive where they would just have a brief minute of silence at the start of every meeting. I think in practice, they did 2 minutes just to give a bit more space than 1 minute, but you're right, 8 is nice. Okay, any other insights from your side on the...
Just like the bodily sensations of the calmness of some quietness and this really delicious chai that I had about half an hour ago and the energies of those two swirling together. It's like this rising and this calming.
And you're at the start of your day, caffeine and epinephrine ascending. I'm at the end of my day, sloping downward.
Yeah, I don't normally drink caffeine. A little chai goes away. Yeah, let's jump in.
Nice. Do you want to maybe screen share and do a bit of a brief walkthrough from some of the notes in the app as the approach you took? Kimi was new to me as seemingly an app building tool. Would that feel useful as a brief summary, or should we just kick into the main conclusions?
Yeah, I'm wondering like how much did you actually read through? And I'm curious. Yeah, again, I think this is maybe part of what we're trying to solve as well, is how can we take some of the stuff that we've both done asynchronously, and then when we're together, have an agenda that makes the most of time, considering both of our working habits. So I actually asked, I took both of our manuals of me. I actually didn't review yours personally, but I ran it through an AI to see how we could better work together. And then what I did is I ran it through the first principles as well. So we have two iterations of what at least Perplexity Pro suggests would improve our working collaboration. Maybe we could start there if that's of interest to you.
Sure, that's great. Yeah, and I didn't see that you shared your. Oh, I see. The RR working with me. I see. Okay, good. I appreciate you. I'll put mine in the same place. Okay, great. Go ahead and share that.
Yeah, I will. Yeah, actually, why don't I just share screen? How about we do that? We'll go through it together.
Okay.
How do I do this? All right, share screen. Share your devices. Yeah, I think that's okay. All right. Can you see this?
Yeah.
So it's given us some suggestions on meeting formats, and it actually suggests extending our sessions to more 90 minutes. It's interesting here. It gives some direct kind of, Andrew appreciates direct, concise exchanges and is shifting to relaxed, playful interactions post sabbatical. Yeah, communication tools. So a bit of guidance on what tools to use in which stage. So WhatsApp strictly for scheduling on the back end, and then Notion for shared notes. The AI has identified me incorrectly as a female. Ask River first if she has cognitive capacity, and note Andrew winces but welcomes it to improve helpfulness. This is feedback, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. And that was my wording in there. And you've added more detail on your manual of me than I did. But
so then I added the kind of first principles research document I put on just what are some of the inefficiencies of meetings at the moment from a first principles perspective. Like why do people meet? Where do they fall short so far to see if that has shifted the insight so far? So yeah, adopt a weekly 45 to 90-minute tactical meeting for progress reviews and problem solving, plus monthly 2-hour strategic sessions. So it's giving us a bit of a framework of the weekly, but then also a slightly longer one as well. Avoiding daily stand-ups unless urgent. Research shows weekly rhythms provide optimal momentum without overload. So pre-meeting discipline, which is definitely something that kept coming up through the research. Actually, it's like what you're saying, like meeting discipline. And a really big part of meeting discipline is the pre-meeting, the practice in the meeting, and then also the post-meeting actions as well. And it strikes me that there's quite a lot of tools available now for the scheduling side of meetings. There's a little bit on obviously the transcriptions and action notes and post-meeting side of things, but there's not a terrible amount on, I'd say, the kind of pre-meeting agenda alignment and I guess broader team context before. And I have to admit, after exploring a bunch of potential solutions based on the first principle issues with meetings right now, I kept coming back to this idea of in these small groups, and we're assuming we're solving for, or at least one of the assumptions based on our last call is that we're solving for small groups, 3 to 5 people, but it's like they're the same groups meeting over and over again, rather than groups that change each time. And I think if we can have the same groups that are meeting weekly and improve their meeting capacity, it's much easier to measure and have an output of improve that outcome.
because you have a baseline starting point versus groups forming sort of ad hoc.
Yeah, exactly. So I think if we're solving for already established teams and then improve their performance as opposed to ones that are coming together, it would go a long way.
Right.
And then also the pre-meeting practices or discipline in terms of every individual going through a bit of a process to identify how's it best to work with me, how's it best to make decisions, how's it best to communicate,
Right.
how's it best to provide feedback, so that the kind of team brain, at least that's maybe one solution we could explore, this idea of team brain can hold that context through all the meeting sessions. And then each individual can update their profile as things progress. Or that
And
strikes
as
me
they
as
learn more
probably,
about what annoys them or delights them.
Yeah, exactly. I think there'll be patterns that the different tools or the different ways to analyze can start to pick out and maybe suggest, hey, maybe it's worth updating this based on the last 4 weeks of meetings. It seems like this and this. So after doing a bit of a initial look at the marketplace, it doesn't seem to be anyone focusing in and around that space in particular, like more of the pre-meeting discipline side of things.
Sorry, not many folks focusing on the pre-meeting discipline.
I haven't been able to find much around that yet.
I was thinking that because originally I like the framework of the pre-meeting discipline, the in-meeting execution, the post-meeting actions. And I was thinking that the bigger gap was what we had originally started with, which was the in-meeting execution and the idea of actually helping with the time boxing, the adherence to the agenda during the meeting, giving little nudges, rewarding folks for ending early, facilitating breakout rooms itself. I noticed that my assumption about how you and I would approach this is that we would just show up. We would do what I almost always do, even in the formal work company meeting, is showing up without an agenda. And I'm just like, hey, what's going on? What should we do? And I understand that is from the research, one of the worst ways you can approach a meeting is not having a clear agenda or clarity on the decisions. And there's a lot of risk of wasting time in meetings. I'm a bit ashamed to admit that I have been responsible in my day for wasting a lot of my own and others' times in meetings. It's just pains me to say, but I'll own it. And so it feels like recursively we should set agendas for our meetings and determine in advance what are the questions we want to answer, and increasingly as we go.
Yeah, I will say that I think it also depends on research is suggesting it depends on the type of meeting that we're having, right? So we're still
And
very much
as
in
you said,
ideation
we're
phase.
forming a
So
relationship.
like an agenda isn't that necessary. Yeah. But if we're working with established teams, then I think that pre-meeting agenda, and again, I see that dovetailing really quite nicely with that layer of context, so that the nudges that can be given during the meeting for maybe just the facilitator or for everyone involved would be much more insightful in a way. So that context that's provided up front, and then that broader context on each individual, and then the kind of collective intelligence as a whole, I think becomes quite a unique set of insights that a model could hold for each team. Yeah. But I'm not tied to that. I'm not sure if you had a chance to look at the kind of solutions, but with my little research partners, I did come up with about 15 or 16 different solutions.
Yeah,
I'm still almost compelled by the team brain thing.
I read the first principles research document you put together, which was striking, and like the stats on how much time is wasted and how much people feel like their work experience is degraded by poor quality meetings is intense and dismaying. And certainly anybody who can take a whack out of that will be doing a service for humanity. I was just was recalling my cousin has a patented invention called the meeting monkey. And it's a little monkey that sits on the boardroom table, and it has symbols in its hands. And there's a little wire that runs all the way around the circumference of the table. And there's a little button under there where you would press on that yellow strip on a bus to say, I want to get off the bus. And so anyone in the meeting at any point anonymously can press that little strip, and it activates the meeting monkey that's, hey, time to move on, time to move on. And it's anonymous. So it cuts the personal, it helps provide that safety of anonymity for people, but it's that sort of feedback. And I was imagining a digital version of that, where if you have time boxed the meeting or a certain topic is going too long, you're starting to get like a yellow indicator or a red indicator. I can imagine something very gentle, like meeting agenda, where the transcript is following along with the words and tracking which part of the agenda you're on, and giving a little visual indicator, maybe for everybody, like if it thinks it's getting into the yellow because you're going over time, or the art issue already decided and hasn't been. And almost like you're filling in a checkbox, the checkbox manifesto, something like that, where if you've got decisions to be made, one of the interventions it said was make sure you're assigning a person who's responsible for that. When the decision is made, get the responsible person assigned at that point and make it really clear. And so you could just imagine if there's a decision made, it just fills out the decision part and who's going to be the person, and like blinks until you guys decide. And it's just giving a little bit of that sort of nudging, and it feels super safe to say that most managers and team leads are not expert meeting facilitators and would benefit from like a meeting co-pilot.
Yeah. So as you're talking about this, there's a few things that are coming up for me, and it's a little bit more like bringing it back up to the high level around just fundamentally there's the issue of alignment. So how do you align people within a team to be focusing in the right direction? And then there's coordination, and that's probably more of the scheduling side of things. And then I feel like you're also talking about like efficiency of time. So that's how do you keep moving people so that they can actually be efficient in making decisions, getting through different agenda points. I'm wondering if there's one part of those that actually lights you up more, or if there's maybe one thing that naturally leads on to the others in terms of sequencing.
The one that lights me up is team alignment, and I feel like that's what's missing generally. Like a lot of what's on my mind. The research that I've done on team flow, individual flow, and team flow is that central to all of that is a shared vision. And it's quite challenging. It's a very organic process to develop a team vision and share. But if you have a clear team vision, that is the alignment. It's like alignment around what you want to see bring into reality. And that clarity, lots of stuff is derivative out of that. And that if you don't have that clarity, then everything else, that's upstream of.
It also strikes me that you probably have quite a large amount of insight on group alignment, having been in more of a monastic setting for a period of time as well, which I would argue is probably one of the more aligned ways of being in community. Does that resonate?
It really does. And there's certain ways in which we were profoundly aligned, and other ways where we didn't have as much emphasis on alignment. But the alignment that I feel viscerally deeply is that a lot of our time is spent in group prayers, like chanting group prayers. And there's something really powerful about trying to generate a good motivation from the depths of your heart. And you're literally, if you're chanting loud, you have to have good posture. You have to be breathing deeply. And so there's so much, like you introduced me to this third story practice of walking around looking at the third story of buildings. And that one of the implicit things of that is you have to tilt your head up and your chest out, shoulders back. And that posture changes your psychology. And the same is true for like deep breathing. You change your psychology, you're richly oxygenating yourself. You're focused on a very good intention. You're focused on concentrating on the meaning of the prayers. You're singing in a group, the voices blend. You produce the sound from your side, but the sound you hear is a mix of everybody's sounds. And it's a perfect analogy for emergence and interdependence, because the collective sound is literally emerging of everybody. And so it's a immediately apparent example of many becoming one. Many bodies become one voice. And in that same way, because you're synchronizing around a common visualization, intentions, these bodies are becoming one mind. And you're literally developing a shared consciousness, both because you're in a shared space and you're all literally seeing the same thing, maybe a temple, but also because you're literally training in the same intention. May I protect all living beings from suffering. May everyone be happy. May they never be separated from their happiness, and so forth. And so it is so profoundly, it is liberating. You're liberated in part by, there's one form of liberation, which is you're liberated from ego and pain and suffering, whatever else, but just by being part of a group. And you can also experience that if you go to a basketball game and you're in a stadium and that you're cheering for the team. There is a loss of sense of self in that context. There's a joining with a larger whole in that context. Now, the area where we didn't have this strong kind of alignment, what was coming to mind is a sports team or a military team where the egos and the unity, it may be weaker on the ego dissolution side of things and weaker on that sort of spiritual unity, but is stronger on the goal orientation and the goal accomplishment. Like in the meditation centers, there was this sort of long-term spiritual goal, but it was not like it varied, but it was a different kind. We were not strongly focusing as a team all the time on like goal accomplishment. But companies everybody needs both. Where sports teams fall down, where military teams fall down, is where individual egos are taking precedence and you're not really getting that unity of purpose, that real deep heart unity of purpose. And where religious entities can fall down is if they're not practically oriented towards accomplishing specific goals. But you really need both on some level.
It certainly strikes me in both of the instances you've described is that you first need individual alignment and collective alignment. Those kind of two practices are really important parts of it, whether it's goal orientated or not. A big part of both of the practices that both institutions, monasteries, and military use is let's align each physical individual unit, but then we align that in the collective as well. So that strikes me that there's some pretty incredible insights to be gained from that, and certainly at least from the broad kind of perspectives of alignment and coordination and then efficiency. Alignment is the one that kind of excites me the most as well. So maybe we can at least
I'm glad we're aligned.
Narrow. Yeah, exactly. Also, it strikes me that alignment is it's also one of the big threads right now in the safety of AI and the tools that are emerging as well, this idea of alignment. So it strikes me that there's a real kind of importance in understanding alignment, but actually having it maybe filtered down to more of an individual and small group perspective as well. And I think there's probably going to be a lot of insights that emerge from there. So with that being said, if we want to maybe focus in on solutions that solve for alignment and go back, and I'm happy to look at, again, first principles perspective on meetings and alignments, what that might do and shape to what that might shift with regards to what solutions we start to consider. Happy to look at that. Yeah. Okay. Just out of interest, I'm curious to see what you thought of the initial just rapid builds that I shared with you as well.
Yeah, I'm conscious of we're recording this, so I'll share on here. But the team brain. That's right. I've got the wrong. Here it is.
Yeah, I think try the other one. I think the other one seemed a little bit more.
Are they two separate apps? Because I thought they were different parts of the same app.
No, they're two separate apps. They were built by different systems.
This is the one, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, this personality assessment is interesting. It's a fast-paced kind of manual of me, and I do think you're onto something in terms of one thing that came to mind when you said about alignment, like in a company context. To what extent does anyone even want to be there? Right? I feel like when teams show up to like be a basketball team, play basketball, on some level they want to be there. But like with your job, do you really want to be there in this company, like doing this thing? And if that's not there, like when you talk about individual alignment, do you want to actually be here? If you don't really want to be here, we don't really want to hear you either.
That's, I think, some of the things that you can uncover in the personal alignment assessment side of things, right? It's a point Like, I'm not sure, like, I actually extended my manual of me a little bit more. So I actually took a bit more time to reflect on what are the things that actually light me up, what are the roles I really enjoy doing, what are the tools I enjoy using, and actually gifted that type thing. So it actually, I think it's a really powerful process to go through.
And by that, you mean you did the manual of me process in a more extensive way, or
Yeah,
what
I
was the
looked at a
process?
bunch of, so like working with me templates. And then there
Mhm.
was this other one I actually haven't quite finished yet, but it's called the Telos, which I put in our notes.
Tell us,
And
right?
it's this, so the Telos is from this open source developer. And his whole thing is the Telos is a file, it's a context file that you can share with your various AIs and agents as you're building things so that it will be aligned with you, like your personal kind of mission. And so anything that's relevant to you, it's in alignment. So again, the alignment piece, yeah, that's the one. I think if you scroll down, or
And for the sake of the viewing audience, telos is this Greek word that means whole, from which we get this term teleology, which when you talk about a shared vision, that's really what you're doing. You're talking about focusing on the whole, and or sorry, it's not the whole, it's more like the outcome or the goal. And it's the idea that, and it was like we organized our book, the book I wrote recently, Flow Engineering, around this concept of teleology. It really is quite powerful. It's very underserved. I've heard from lots of people about how incredibly underserved this idea of defining a target goal is. And so it's funny, he's very thin on detail. So he just gave an example. That's all this is.
yeah,
An example to follow.
yeah. So there's basically a corporate TLOS and then there's a personal TLOS. And so it's basically just outlining high level categories of information, and then you put the kind of the dot points in. A little bit like what a lot of these working with me templates and something like the manual of me explores as well. It takes you through a series of questions to help identify a few aspects of your personality that are worth putting down. So yeah, so team goals, PIs, risks, that kind of stuff. There just
It's
seems to be quite a
interesting
lot
that
of value in
they,
going through that process. Yeah.
they're prioritized. Like they've been quite explicit with this. It's quite crisp, right? That
Mm.
they've prioritized where you've got
Yeah,
something.
exactly. That dot
There's
points. Yeah.
two number ones and two number threes here, where
Mm.
there was a tie. And he's got some of that sort of military level of precision, which I'm not surprised coming from a security company. I don't know what SPQA is, other than maybe security something, quality assurance, or is that an acronym you know, or probably not that.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with
Let's see,
the
appreciate it.
example that's
Oh,
been given
this
as
guy,
corporate
this is
colors.
the
Yeah.
same guy who wrote it. Interesting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
This is the
Daniel
same
Meisler.
guy.
Yeah.
AI-based architecture that will replace most existing software. That's quite a bold prediction. 2.5 years ago. And his Telos project is just earlier this year, if I recall correctly. But so SPQA,
Yeah.
state, new architecture, state policy questions and action. And interesting, this understanding based, I think he's predicting, it's interesting, fundamentally transitioning from circuit-based architecture to understanding-based architecture. I think what he's saying is that he's giving a metaphor of the way we've done programming in the past is algorithmic, like designing circuits. Literally, Boolean algebra came out of designing electrical circuits. And so you're designing like if this, then this, and so forth. Whereas what you were doing is you were showing this prompt engineering, right? And so you have the goal that you want to accomplish. Build me an app that does whatever. So I pulled up Kimi AI, and see you could put into Kimi, this is the end state that I want to create. I want to create a meeting app or something like that. If you can clearly define the end state you want to accomplish, you can take that prompt with sufficient detail and you can put it into any different AI system or regenerate, and it completely regenerates the entire application. It basically, what's been expensive in the past is designing the individual circuitry of the algorithms, and that's now cheap. That's become super cheap to like refactor the code base. What's expensive is getting the clarity on the state that you want, the modularity, the architecture, and so forth. So I had some similar ideas about an architecture for an application where you build the architecture through prompts. Like you define the modularity. And I've seen some other folks building. I certainly would love for us in our building process to do that, build around the desired state that we want to accomplish. And then it comes out of that. I'll have to digest this a little bit more, but so
With that being the case, I'm wondering how we might be able to practice that for our next meeting in terms of,
okay.
We've now got a little bit of context on both of us in terms of working with meeting manuals, which we did as homework between our last meeting and this meeting. I think based on that, we could probably think through a little bit more of an agenda, like a pre-meeting thing that both aligns us, gives us more alignment individually, and then collectively for what we're trying to achieve. I'm happy to just run that through a few models, but perhaps you've got some ideas on how to match those things together as well.
Yeah, you've got, I think you're demonstrating more fluency than I have about running things through the models and letting them do a lot of the working and the design and the thinking. My default is old school, like writing and thinking stuff, but yeah, some hybrid. And thought I was hearing you say that if we, having just met this guy, but we think about what is this, if we agreed that we want alignment as the primary goal, we agreed that this looking at the telos, the teleology of what is the shared vision is critical. Stumbled randomly and rapidly on this guy with some structure about how to build applications. I'm certainly happy for us to take that as a framework, like defining what is the state, policy questions. We'll have to digest this a little bit to understand what this means, but yeah. Does that match what you were?
Yeah, absolutely. I think just in terms of maybe actions for next week, what if we both, in individual ways, explored what insight we could bring for an agenda for next call, and then see, compare and contrast those two approaches in terms of adding more alignment and both more alignment individually and together.
I guess we are getting close to our time, yeah, as opposed to 60 minutes.
Yeah, I do appreciate I'm actually even starting to do long talks with people, so more like the 3-hour mark as well,
Nice.
to really provide some spaciousness to explore more of the rabbit holes and the divergent thinking, and then come back. And I've been listening to a bit of Joe Rogan recently, and I'm actually quite envious and jealous of the fact that he has like these long blocks of time with people to talk through. And there's so many people that I know and friends that I wish I had that kind of long talk with. So I'm definitely creating more opportunities for that. So we could definitely create one of those.
You and I have built up a lot of shared context now within this meeting that's in our short-term memory, like working memory and stuff. And we lose that. We go a week later. It takes roughly 20 minutes to rebuild the sort of full context on a meeting that was lost before. So I'm happy to keep running with momentum on this. Yeah. So we could take a little bit of time to just what he's. Yeah,
I certainly don't have a hard stop I don't have a hard stop today. That's a really interesting insight or context. I hadn't heard that before, so I'm going to put that into the research and see. Like even that piece there, like 20 minutes to rebuild group context. Feels like such a huge thing to solve for. Some of the other insights that came through in the research was 50% of meeting time is wasted, with average employees spending 31 hours per month on meetings. So the ability to reduce that time, and I think just fundamentally being able to save time, such a value add for so many people at this point. Yeah, exactly. 67% of employees report that too many meetings prevent them from completing actual work. 92% of meeting attendees multitask during meetings. Like this to me seems like a really good indicator that meetings are not effective. Yeah, and then 63 of meetings lack a predefined agenda, and that probably even of those that have a predefined agenda, like how many of those agendas are actually aligned.
And this does not, you probably would struggle to get any good statistics on this, but how can the agenda be well defined if the company doesn't have real clarity on what they want to accomplish? And so if the company lacks clarity on what they want to accomplish, if the employees are not aligned with the company, then how can you build effective meetings that's way downstream of company alignment, right?
One assumption that's coming to mind now is, do you actually need to have company alignment? And does alignment emerge if at least every individual showing up has their own individual alignment? And then maybe this collective alignment emerges. I'm curious to see if that is something or not.
There's some research that I've really been enjoying on team flow, and it extended research that I'd done for this book, Flow Engineering, that I'd worked on. But this is a visualization, a visual diagram. I can put it in the document as well, about what it takes to create team alignment. And in the center is what they call collective ambition. And they've got these three pillars, if you want. Direction. There needs to be a common direction. And it starts, if you look at audacious common goal, that's like what the central corporate office is supposed to help create, audacious common goal. But then what's critically important is that at each level of management to figure out aligning personal goals. And I've experienced the magic of doing career planning talks with people that reported to me. And I learn about something that they really want to do. And I'm like, we could really use somebody who was doing that in this company. And what if we had you working on that? Or it takes work to figure out how to align your personal goals with the company goals. But if you can do that, and what is the thing that you are most passionate about? What would you like to be doing in 5 years? Something like that. Ideally, if money was no issue and so forth. Anyway, so that process of aligning personal goals with company goals, I don't think it just emerges naturally. What emerges, there's a saying from truckers that only 3 things emerge naturally from in teams, which is friction, confusion, and lack of alignment or something like that. And then everything else takes management. And
yeah, that sounds about right.
And so a pure top-down model is bankrupt. A pure bottoms-up emergent model is also bankrupt. But this sort of hybrid hierarchy type model. So if you've got common direction here, and then clear and challenging task division, where you've got people working on things that are meaningful for them, but then high skill integration. So let's say I'm decide that I really want to focus on communicating and giving teaching kind of things, and you want to focus on the coding side of things. We've got some differentiation and then the integration of our skills. And then, but you also need a positive and supportive work environment. So they're basically saying they've got strong research from 1,500 teams that they studied, that these factors all come together, and this idea of a collective ambition where there's a goal and there's a bit of hustle towards that, if that makes sense.
I'm just wondering if you can, it definitely makes a lot of sense, but I'm just wondering if you could extend our meeting right now for maybe another half an hour so we don't get cut off. Because I think Meets has a handy little thing that cuts us off these days if we run 10 minutes over there.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any warnings on my side. Are you seeing warnings?
Yeah, it will come up at some point. Yeah, something just came up, like your meeting's about to end, schedule another time. And I do know in the past that going over a bit, it will close us out quite quickly. I think 10 minutes after. So if you want to extend a little bit.
But I don't think
I guess what I was
do it within the meeting. We'd have to kick into a different meeting.
I think if you just edit the calendar invite and extend it by 30 minutes, it works.
Oh, good.
See, here you go.
All right, that's done.
So I think what I was suggesting with the tools that we have available is that collective alignment would emerge with the support of the different models that we could basically orient and prompt to provide the insights that that larger alignment emerges. It doesn't necessarily emerge by itself. If
I would love for us to focus on figuring out what are the nudges that are required to bring that about.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. So again, if we want something that is workable in the next kind of few weeks as well, because I'd definitely like to get something out there that we can share with people and test and play. In fact, with another friend, we're actually just releasing something this week. If you want to pull it up, I'd love to get your initial thoughts on it as maybe inspiration for simple nudges. But it's at life-time.co.
All right. When we met last week,
Yeah,
you had just created this company and now you've launched like the speed.
Yeah, we're just about to. So the idea
River.
is in time for the New Year's, instead of making resolutions, it's converting those resolutions into reservations.
Oh,
So we have
right.
just a really simple tool that allows you to go in, reflect a little bit on the year that was past, and then make a reservation for the year ahead and add it to your calendar and share it with a few friends. So really simple,
That's very cute. Okay.
really simple little tool. And I'm not suggesting you do it right now, but I'm wondering if maybe there's something that is this simple that we could start with.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
And something like this is we've created something that you can put in these kind of reoccurring calendar invites. And with that being the case, in the description of each event, you can pre-program the agenda into it in some way. I'm not sure if we could do that dynamically every week though. That would be, anyway, that's probably a level of detail that's not necessary at this point.
I think I wasn't quite tracking on what bit you wanted to do every week. So I guess I was stuck I was caught for a moment daydreaming, imagining about what we would build here. And I think some of it is like visioning, like this idea of aligned personal goals. What do you think's the company goal? What would it look like? What are some ideas that the company would have? And what are some ideas that you would have individually, right? This is some special moments in your day, but how quickly could you generate something about what would you like to accomplish with your life, right? Or what impact would you like this company to have in your industry or something like that? And then crowdsource that a little bit to figure out how to create some alignment within that. Like you had merged our working with me templates to create some sense about alignment. And what if we build a quick app that allows us to query individuals and what are your personal goals? Because that would be immediately relevant for me in Living Code, this company that I'm creating. I would benefit from getting more clear on like the variety of things that I would like to accomplish that are like long-standing life dreams for me and for the company. And then I would love to do the same with Luke to see if there's other people where when people put their ambitions down, see if those ambitions align and see who resonates with it. Anybody into that vision? And that's an interesting way to find partners. Right? Like I see in your thing, it's the About Us page. It's very sweet, right? With love, Tay and River, right? So you guys had on some level, you found something you aligned around. And you and I are here doing the same thing. We're trying to create a vision for what's this app, and then we're aligning around it.
Yeah.
And so it becomes quite meta where we're building an app to be able to put out our vision and then see who wants to sign up. Who would ideally love to work on that? It's obviously not everything you need to build an effective organization, but it's a really good start. Are you in?
Maybe it's stripping it back from maybe an organizational layer, but how do you help create these really effective partnerships? Because in each organization, you can have these really effective partnerships between small groups of people. And it strikes me that I think the original insight that you had last week around let's focus this around small group sizes around 3 to 5 people, or maybe let's go 2 to 5 people, and teams that meet on a reoccurring basis. That seems to be the sweet spot in which we can have a big amount of impact. And not each of those teams necessarily has to be fully aligned with maybe a huge corporate vision, but at least within their unit, if they're aligned, some big things could start to move. So that strikes me as an interesting kind of field to explore and play with. And then also we're solving our own problem as we're going through this process as well. So we already have this kind of beginner's mindset that we're approaching it in our own process.
Yeah. And if you think about it as if your group of 3 to 5 people is running a company together, then, your shared vision is the company vision. If you're part of a much bigger thing, you're absolutely right. You still need that coherence. If there's going to be optimism and effectiveness within that group, there has to be coherence, and if you're 3 to 5 people building a company, you're saying, this is the contribution we want to make to society. And then outside of that group of 3 to 5 people is the rest of society. If you're 3 to 5 people within a corporation, you're saying, this is the contribution we want to make within the ecosystem of the corporation. So you're not directly exposed to external customers, perhaps, but it's still, we're all nested in different environments, right? We're all nested in different contexts. But within each of those, there needs to be coherence if you want to work effectively. Yeah. Okay. So so we have 20 minutes allocated left here. What are your thoughts on good next steps for us? Because I like the idea of us building an app like this.
Yeah, I think let's definitely focus on building a tool of some sorts, whether it's a web app or an app that's just something that. So I think we have a good sense of what the outcome wants to be. We're talking around what alignment feels like, and in a rather meta way, the alignment in our instance is actually helping to solve for alignment and coherence, both on an individual and kind of small group scale that then could scale up to larger organizational contexts as well. I think the frameworks of the Working With Me templates partnered with the kind of Telos framework and having these kind of context files that can be plugged into different LLMs, agentic models as they emerge. It's going to be valuable context and data, irrespective of what tools emerge over the next six months, 12 months. And therefore, I think quite a valuable series of insights that we'll be able to help cultivate within these small groups. It strikes me that probably a next best step would be to come up with what are the questions that would need to be asked on both an individual and collective to help create that alignment and coherence.
Okay, that sounds like something we could get research assistance on. So there is this.
Yeah, absolutely. And then it also strikes me as quite an easy first place to start in terms of we can invite people to come in and do like an audit, an alignment audit. Like how aligned are you personally? How aligned are you collectively? And it strikes me that those audits are really powerful tools to see if there's a system that is, or a tool that's valuable to different teams. And then I think even without building anything, we could just share this audit thing with a few different small teams and see what comes up from there. And then from that point, I think we'd be in a good position to build something actually worthwhile.
Mm-hmm. Okay. There's a concept of think first, then prompt as a way to work with AI. So what if we design the question that we want to ask, and then you and I we time box ourselves, work for 3 or 4 minutes on generating ideas on that, and then put it in an AI and see how that might augment our answers?
Okay.
Thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. You want to do that now?
I think so. So shall we, what do we think? 3 minutes, 4 minutes to contemplate?
Yeah, sure. And just so we're on the same page, what's the like overarching contemplation?
You see the prompt that I've got here?
What are the questions we need to ask individuals and groups to assess alignment? That's great.
Yeah. Clarify what it is that they want to. So I think that would be a prompt that we can put in and get some clarity on. So that'll be the prompt. And why don't we take 3 minutes to generate our own answers. Just if you want to write things down here, we'll mix them together and then we can put it in an LLM.
Yeah,
see if
sounds
that
great.
makes sense. Okay. Mm. Okay. Okay. It's interesting. You wrote the prompt and I wrote my answers to the prompt. But okay, why don't we both use our respective default tools and we will circle back on the answers. It looks like I've lost River.